where is Nebraska as a program? And DP kind of brought up a scale where 0 is your bottom, maybe your Northwestern. You can throw into that group, possibly in Indiana, the bottom of the Big Ten. The 100, the All-Star, the where you want to be is Michigan. 2 straight years beating Ohio State. This year they go into the playoff undefeated, sitting at second in the country. Ohio State right behind them, also in the playoff, maybe a 96-97. And then you have the question, where is Nebraska and where do they fit into that ranking? And then based off of that, how do you create expectations? What are the expectations? So I'm just going to kind of toss it to you, Strick, and let you take it away, because I said, to be honest with you, I look at Nebraska around a 25. And I know that's not what fans want to hear, and I know that it's tough to hear, but Nebraska, as it currently stands, has the longest streak in Power 5 without making a bowl game. Making a bowl game. You have not been 500 in 6 seasons now. And I think Matt Rhule changes that. There's a lot of optimism around the program, but then we went through the roster. We talked about the transfer portal. We talked about the new coaching staff. There's so many moving pieces that at what point do you take this 25 where I'm ranking Nebraska, and how quickly do they get up towards that 100 mark? And what can the expectations be in year one? Because to be entirely honest with you, Strick, this isn't going to be a quick fix. But unfortunately for Nebraska, and unfortunately for Matt Rhule and the staff, you're paying for him to be a quick fix. Listen, you're not giving someone $9 million a year to win 2 games this season. I'm sorry. It's not what's going to happen. You can. I think it could take some time. So I just want to know, where do you think Nebraska's at on that scale? And what do we look at when it comes to expectations?
All right. So one of the things is that Nebraska in itself, I would beg to differ against what you just said a little bit. And the reason is they signed him for an 8-year contract because there's something he sat down and he said to them about the timetable. So here's the thing, the depth, I think, of what we have to look at. One, you have to look at now over a decade plus of previous coaches going all the way back to Callahan, Rhule, and Frost, where it has been an abject failure. Let's just call it what it is. You lose out on your in-state recruiting base starting with Callahan. And it just starts to go downhill from there. He didn't take a liking. He didn't want it. He didn't have an idea. He was so high-end, pro-style, looking at tangibles and not looking at heart and players and development. And so that just started to taper off. Then you had Rhule, very West Coast dominated, started to bring in a lot of West Coast guys, got some good guys to come in here, and they got really soft. I think
it wasn't a long-term solution. It wasn't a
long-term solution. So now you have a long-term solution because you've pretty much hit rock bottom in a lot of ways. Not necessarily in the talent that you've been able to bring in, but you've hit rock bottom in your culture. Your culture has been decimated. And so now you have to look at, and what we've always talked about is the foundation, the building blocks that have been lost have to now be mended so that it can begin to grow and hopefully be good again. Now, here's another thing to look at as far as the Big Ten, as far as ratings. Michigan, for the most part, they compete. They usually are very high in 3 stars. They'll grab a few 4 stars. Very seldom they'll grab a 5, but yet they're still able to beat an Ohio State team over the last 2 years. So that's got to tell you something more of what's going on in the Big Ten. Between Ohio State, they're very heavy in 4, and maybe they'll grab 2, 3, 5 stars at the end of the day. And then you say the same thing for Penn State. Consistently, Penn State wins in the recruiting game, but they can't win on the field. So you have to ask that question: what is going on with that part of it at the top tier of the programs, right? Nebraska's got work to do right now. I think at about this point, they have roughly 15 commits. Probably a high majority of that is some 3-star talent, 1 4-star. So when you look at stars, they're at the bottom tier of the program. But I think if you're looking at what you're talking about, the rankings, I like where you rank them at about 25, because I love the talk. I love all the vision. I love the potential direction. I love that even though you're in the 3-star range right now, you still got some work to do, and you may be able to sway a few of those individuals to creep over, maybe grab another couple 4 stars if you can. And then you really are looking at the development range, and that's why you see him going at some FCF guys, some guys in the portal that you're looking to bring in that have, you know, some tangibles about them that they feel that they can develop. So they still got some work to do. So I like where you rated them around that 25 range.
Well, I want to ask about that a little bit too, because I know we talk about the transfer portal as a whole pretty often, but the guys on the happy hour were talking about this, and this isn't where I had necessarily agreed, where they were talking about maybe these quarterbacks, these top tier quarterbacks. Why isn't Nebraska reaching out? Should we limit expectations when it comes to Nebraska and the transfer portal? And the pushback that I had, first of all, when it comes to the quarterback situation, you had Adrian Martinez for 4 years. Did it work out how you wanted it to? No. But you decided that Adrian Martinez was your quarterback. That's a good portion of when the transfer portal became what we can call the transfer portal. Last year, you got the number 1 touchdown passer in the Big 12 to commit and play at Nebraska. That's a win in the transfer portal. Has it worked out this year? Not necessarily yet, but it's still early. I know Cade McNamara has gone to Iowa. He's decided he's going to go to Iowa. I saw that Brennan Armstrong is going to be visiting Wisconsin. So I think that's maybe where Nebraska fans might look at the pressure's on now. You have to make a move at the quarterback position. I think we need to pump the brakes a little bit. If we remember, Casey Thompson was a little bit later into when the dominoes started to fall when it comes to the transfer portal and quarterback situation. Also, the pushback I had with that is that if you're in Nebraska, I don't think you want to be at the top of the transfer portal list, but I think you've shown that you have the ability to. Because last year, if you look at the transfer portal rankings, Nebraska was 7th. 7th. And I think that it's more of an indictment and more of an issue that a lot of those guys didn't pan out or maybe develop as you wanted them to. That's more of a Nebraska issue. You can get these guys in the program. You can get these guys to buy in and choose Nebraska. Did they all work out? No. That's the reality of the transfer portal. It's not all going to work out. And a lot of these guys that you decide that, okay, this is a top transfer portal guy, let's bring him in, let's give him NIL money, let's see what he can do. Well, now it's up to coaching. You have to be able to coach that guy. You have to be able to get him to buy into the culture. You need to understand what Nebraska's foundation is and have that guy perform at a high level. I don't think it's an issue of getting guys from the transfer portal. Nebraska showed last year they can do that. They can go with the cream of the crop, the top of the best, however you want to word it. Nebraska was at the top. It just didn't pan out. And I'm curious to see, Strick, if when the dominoes start to fall, Nebraska attacks the transfer portal similar to how they did last year. Because like I mentioned to Evan Bland, Matt Rhule hasn't been a part of the college landscape when it comes to the transfer portal, how it's currently constructed. He's never seen it. He's never coached it. He's never been a part of it. How do you see that working? And are you with, because a lot of fans want to go to the transfer portal immediately, reload, give Matt Rhule a fighting chance this first year. And I just look at it as a situation, I don't know if that's the direction that he's going to take.
Well, I don't know if it's the high level direction, because you got to think you have 2 different dynamics that are at play. One, you have a Scott Frost who it was in a need to win, produce now, or get to step in, right? That was one situation. Matt Rhule is in a long tenured contract. Yes, we had to give up the bag to keep Scott Frost. We all know what that cost us, $17-something million, right? We know what that was. But at the end of the day, Matt Rhule is in a uniquely different situation, whereas he can attack the transfer portal. He's already late in the recruiting game. So he's actually trying to assess, evaluate, and figure out which one of those who was along the Mickey Joseph, it was along the Scott Frost recruiting commits or verbals and whatnot, and have these discussions with those individuals or pass on, because I think Matt Rhule is going to attack the transfer portal from the lower tiers up. I think he's going to attack it from the FCS who are out hunting. He's going to attack it from the mid-majors who are out hunting. He's not going to I don't think he's really going after your Texases and your Alabamas. There might be one or so that he's in there. I think he's going after a few from Texas A&M, but that's not his major play. I think his major play is who's got body, who's got speed, who's got strength, who's ready. But if we coach them right, we can get them right. Who has character, who has drive, who has intensity. All these different tangible things that he's probably looking at from a culture standpoint, from building standpoint, who is not necessarily ready-made to come in and just change the landscape, but who has the capability with great coachings to do some great things. That's where I think he's probably looking at it from the transfer.
Well, Strick, I want to ask you this because you bring up a good point. When you talk about these FCS guys, maybe these guys that started at a lower tier program and worked their way up to Nebraska, there's plenty of film on those guys. You know exactly what you're getting because they've been on the field. They've been a part of a program. They've started at still a high level of football. But then on the flip side, you have the guys like the Chubba Purdy's. My mind is drawn a blank. Maybe the Kane Williams, guys that were part of top quality football programs, but didn't see the field. Yeah. If you're a coach, let me just ask you, I'm not asking Matt Rhule, I'm not asking Trevor, I'm asking Strick. Say you're in the coaching ranks, you're recruiting. Would you rather have those guys from the lower ranks that have been on the field playing, or maybe a third string guy that's been a part of an Alabama or a Florida State?
If my idea for what I'm trying to build is built on us doing our job as a coach. If I'm a coach, if I'm sitting down and Matt Rhule has me in a room and I'm one of the coaching staff and he's telling me what his expectations are, what he's looking for, what he's trying to do, what he wants to accomplish, and how he wants to get it done. And I began to take my notes. As I'm looking at that, I'm looking at all of those aspects in those individuals, and you're absolutely right. I want to be able to see them. Mm-hmm. I don't want to hear about what a recruiting person said. I don't want to hear about what a scouting report said. I don't want to hear about a 7-on-7 rankings and what he did against this top tier cornerback or whatever the case. I don't want to hear about none of that. I want to know about what show me some film. Let me see what his footwork is phenomenal. I can coach that. I can make that better. Ooh. His hand placement from the tackle position, I like that. He's got good length. He can put his hands on. I like that. He's got good hips. Oh, he's got a great dip move with a spin. I like that. I can work with him on that because he gets off the ball. I want to be able to see that because I know I can coach that.
And another thing, too, and I don't know if maybe there's some hesitation from Nebraska fans when it comes to these FCS players, because a lot of the time, I mean, you hear, oh, this guy went to Alabama, oh, this guy went to Texas A&M, he's got to be good. That's not all necessarily the case. Sometimes there's reasons that they're not on the field. Sometimes there's a reason they're transferring. Another point I want to make, too, when you talk about these FCS guys, a lot of those guys are playing on Sundays now. Like this is the reality of it, is that a lot of guys get lost. A lot of guys haven't reached their full potential yet. They'll go to a North Dakota State. They'll go to a South Dakota State. They'll go to a JMU. And guess what? They're playing on Sundays with the best in the world. So I think when you look at these FCS guys, and if Matt Rhule's truthfully able to assess that situation, see the tape, be in a room with the guy, see where his head's at, I agree with you, Strick. I think that's a great way to start somewhere, because at the end of the day, if you're building a program and you have to start from scratch, which is essentially what Matt Rhule is doing right now, you have to hit the transfer portal and you have to find the diamonds in the rough. And I'm not saying that Matt Rhule is just going to throw the high school recruiting out the window. I still truthfully believe, even with the current landscape of college football in the transfer portal, you got to be able to recruit kids out of high school. You got to get kids that buy in early.
Right.
But FCS
but you don't have time. They haven't had time to do that. That's why it's got to be done the way I think that he's going to approach it. You're absolutely right, Nate, because you have to ask the question, how did Brent Bielema do it? What did he do? He either started from the foundation. It took him a little bit of time. He brought in and developed specific guys in the style that he wanted to play, and they played it pretty well and had some success. Right? You got to look at guys and teams like that. What did they do that's unique, that made them have such a tremendous turnaround and to be effective as far as playing and competing at a high level in the Big Ten? Listen, Michigan does not get the same type of players that Ohio State gets. Right. But there's something they're doing, And there's a type of player or a style of player that they're getting that's beating the brakes off of them in the trenches. I don't know if it's heart. I don't know if it's mental. I don't know if it's chips on shoulders. I don't know what it is. I don't care, but you're getting it done on Saturdays. And I love what they got. So bump a star. I don't know. I probably would have been a 3-star or something. Ain't no telling. But, I was able to compete at a high level against some of the best in the world. And sometimes it ain't all about a star. And I think that's what's getting overlooked. Everybody is geeking and getting all hyped and high driven on the fact of a star. I don't think it's always a star. I think sometimes it's a fit for what you're trying to accomplish and do.
And I think a great point on the text line here too, Strake. And we didn't even mention this. Look at Samori Toure. See how beneficial an FCS player can be? You're absolutely right, because guess what? Samori Toure is playing on Sundays right now. Yeah. And he came from a lower FCS, decided he was going to play at Nebraska, showed his skill set there on Saturdays in the Big Ten. And guess what? Now he's playing for the Green Bay Packers. He's in the NFL. And I think another thing, too, that Nebraska has in their advantage when you look at a team like a Minnesota or Illinois, Nebraska has all the resources in the world. Like, Nebraska is going to be able – now, listen, like I've always said, you're not going to be able to recruit with the LSUs, the Florida States, the UCLAs, the USC. Listen, it especially in the transfer portal, you're just not going to be able to. But guess what? There's no way in hell that I would ever let a kid choose Illinois or Minnesota over Nebraska. What the hell do those schools have that Nebraska doesn't? They have a winning record as of right now, but guess what? You give me 2 or 3 years building a culture under a Matt Rhule, and if it works out how we want it to work out and how it should work out, there is no chance I would ever choose a school like Illinois over Minnesota. You have the best facilities in the country. You have the best fan base in the country. You have all the resources of NIL. I mean, there is no way you should lose out to a team like that once you start winning, too. And I think the transfer portal, you'll be able to lure those kids as well.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think with those opportunities, those research, you want to be the best in that part of winning that game. It's the same thing as like if you want to, you're in the state of Nebraska, you want to win the state. That's why, Creighton has had tremendous success. You just look at a lot of the top tier guys that have come through and out of here. They in some way or another have touched over a period of time. I mean, it's not there like as of late, but over a period of time, they were the ones that was nabbing them. And also UNO, and some of those guys that left, they went on to do some tremendous things elsewhere. You've got to win those battles. So you've got to be that guy. You've got to be the king of your niche, of your space, of your spot. You got to be the king of it. Like you're not going, don't look at it as you're going to become the next Alabama overnight, because you're not. You have to start with this, and you have to give them a reason or want to be at your program. So be the best in that space. Be the best at your development. Be the best at your finding those diamonds. Be the best at developing them up to become 5 stars by the time they leave this program. That is your goal. That is your job. If you come and coach at Nebraska and you don't have that in mind, you don't have that work ethic in mind, that's why I think they kept Rhule. Word is, Rhule is one of the hardest working men in the business. That fits the culture of what Coach Rhule is trying to do, and let's see where it goes.
And we know that Matt Rhule is a hard worker. I mean, you can see that so far just by what he's done in the few weeks he's been at Nebraska. Also, too, what helps me sleep at night, should help Nebraska fans sleep at night as well, is when you look at Baylor in their program, they weren't built off of 5 stars. The name of the game for Matt Rhule, since he's been a head coach at the college football FBS level, has been development. And that's what you're going to have to do at Nebraska. And that's what we haven't seen over the past few years. And I think that's where you start that foundation. That's where you start that culture. And it'll be exciting to watch, too, because, again, Matt Rhule's hit the ground running. We'll see how it works out. And I definitely can't wait till we start out the season at Minnesota. But a lot happening and a lot yet to be seen. We got